The other one I want to talk about briefly is a 1997 study by the Health Insurance Association of America found that 75% of insurance fraud is committed by providers, which is their code word for doctors. 75% of health insurance fraud is committed by doctors who apply for payment, which they get for procedures they didn't even do. They apply for payment for procedures they give you that you didn't need. They're the only profession or trade in America or the world where they don't have to go to a bank when they need extra money. They just send in a couple of claims to the insurance company pays them. There's not a single doctor ever goes to jail for that. Insurance companies write that off as the cost of doing business. Now, who pays for that? Each and every one of us as these premiums go up, as more and more doctors are doing these things. And they look at it as, hey, it's our money, we're going to get it anyway we have to. This came out in September of 1997. It was an article published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Young doctors lack stethoscope skills, which is, the primary instrument of a doctor. Many new doctors steeped in high-tech medicine can't properly use a stethoscope. What they learned was they could just identify 20%. They could just identify 20% of heart problems that were presented to them. They could not identify 80%. How can you go to school for 14 years and not use a stethoscope? It's like an apprentice carpenter apprenticing for 7 years. How can you not learn how to use a hammer, right? Well, the reason why doctors don't spend any time learning how to use a stethoscope is because if they were to use a stethoscope to diagnose cardiovascular problems, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, you can identify all cardiovascular problems with a stethoscope. It takes you an extra 10 minutes to listen to every square millimeter of the heart and the valves and the arteries and things, but you can do it. Gain the skills to do it, but then you make an extra $30 for a long office visit. But if they send you in for an angiogram, or a CAT scan, or an MRI, or an ultrasound, guess what? They make $421 every time they send somebody in for those procedures. What's better, $421 or $30? Okay. You're beginning to get a picture develop here. Now this happens 3,000 times a year in America. Mildred C. Clark, 86 years old, was found cold, stiff, and blue on her apartment floor. And the apartment manager got scared because he thought she was dead, so he called the paramedics, and they examined her. Yeah, she's dead. And so they called the coroner. He came out. Yeah, she's dead. So they put her in a body bag and shipped her to the Albany, New York Medical Center, which was associated with a medical school there in upstate New York. And so they sent an intern down to do the final exam before they wrote a death certificate on her, because you can't do an autopsy on somebody until they've had a death certificate. So he examines her, and he probably just closed his eye. Probably never seen a dead body by himself, right? So everybody else says she's dead, so he writes this death certificate. They take her down to the morgue, and they strip her naked, take a pressure hose, blow all her makeup and gunk off her body, put her wet, naked body into the body bag, and they put her in a freezer for 90 minutes until the medical examiner and the pathologist get there to do the autopsy. 90 minutes after being in the freezer, they wheel her out and zip open the body bag, and Mildred C. Clark, 86 years old, sits up. She says, "Thank God you found me. It was cold and dark in there, and I didn't know where I was." I mean, after 14 years of medical school, doctors can't even tell if you're alive or dead. That makes me nervous. And then according to Ralph Nader in January of 1993, big study, according to Ralph Nader, doctors kill each year in America 300,000 patients in hospitals alone each year as a result of medical negligence. 300,000 are killed each year in hospitals alone as a result of medical negligence. Each year in America, 1.3 million Americans are injured in hospitals as a result of medical negligence. Each year in America, 2 million are infected in hospitals alone as a result of medical negligence. And despite heroic round-the-clock nursing care and intravenous antibiotics, 90,000 to 100,000 of these 2 million each year die. In hospitals each year, 2.2 million people get what's called adverse drug reactions to the drugs that they are introduced to in the hospital, and despite heroic measures, 140,000 to 200,000 die every year. You add these up, ladies and gentlemen, that's 3.5 million to 4 million casualties killed, injured, and infected each year in hospitals by doctors each year. 3.5 million to 4 million killed, injured, and infected each year in hospitals by doctors. It's estimated to be double that outside of hospitals. Now, we're not talking about 3 people a year here. We're talking about a huge number of people. So, why do we go to doctors for health and longevity information? In 1999, doctors were believed to be the 8th top killer of Americans. Medical mistakes are the 8th top killer of Americans, behind cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, gastrointestinal problems, liver problems, kidney problems, and doctors. Today, this is just out. I haven't had time to make a slide, but trust me, right now, doctors each year in America kill just short of 800,000 people. They're now listed as the #1 cause of death in Americans. Number 2 is cardiovascular disease. Number 3 is cancer. Number 1 are doctor kills. Okay? Now, how do we deal with this? You know, even Thomas Jefferson said that a little revolution once in a while is a good thing. It's time to revolt against the American healthcare system. They do everything in their favor, nothing in the favor of the patients. It's a miracle. It's a God-given miracle if you survive a hospital visit, truly, without being damaged or infected or killed. And so, how do we deal with this? Well, we've learned in other instances how to deal with these kind of problems when the industry is abusing us. For instance, 60 years ago, when the automobile industry began to abuse customers, you know, you go in for a $6 oil change 60 years ago, and you go to pick up your car. They say, well, it's $300. You say, why? That's my month's wages. What do you mean, $300? Well, you told us to do whatever was necessary, and so we rebuilt your transmission, we rebuilt your carburetor, we gave you all new tires, we rotated them, we put in new brake shoes, new spark plugs, we gapped them, we did your timing, $300. And you kicked the counter and yelled and screamed, but in the end, you paid your $300. Well, people got tired of that, and so they started going to flea markets and junkyards and garage sales looking for parts for their car. And after a while, the demand for these parts and tools at garage sales and flea markets and junkyards became so great, these sources couldn't handle the demand anymore, so a whole industry popped up. How many of you have heard of Napa Auto Parts and Pep Boys and AutoZone and Schutz? And because now you can walk in, you can get any part you want, you can get any tool you want for working on your own car, this has turned out to be a huge industry. And that's because the automobile industry got greedy some 60 years ago, and now more and more people do it themselves. And the same thing happened in the construction industry. When it got to the point where they were charging little couple $60 to change the float in the toilet and $200 to change the light bulb, and little couples would sign a contract for a $6,000 roof, but they didn't point out to them that there's a rotating interest thing, a revolving interest thing, and if you didn't pay it in a year, it cost you $100,000. And all these horror stories came out, so people began to go to junkyards and garage sales and flea markets looking for materials and tools to maintain and repair their own homes. How many remember back in the 50s and 60s when everybody had a table saw and a bandsaw and routers and all these tools, you turn your garage into a shop and everybody began to do things themselves? Well, soon these sources couldn't supply the demand anymore, so a whole industry developed to supply the demand for people who want to maintain and repair their own homes. They're called Home Depot and Lowe's and Menards, and if you don't know how to put shingles on your own roof, they'll give you a free class. Okay? Well, it's long overdue that we rebel in the same way against the healthcare industry. We need to do more and more ourselves. With a little bit of education, 15 minutes of reading a night, listening to tapes or CDs in your drive around your car. In any particular instance, with 15 minutes of reading, you can do whatever a doctor does. It's that simple. For instance, a doctor has less than $100 worth of stuff in his examining room. He's got a blood pressure cuff, a stethoscope, he's got a thermometer, a little rubber mallet to see if you have reflexes. Well, if you walk in the examining room, I know you got reflexes. Now, if they carry in, I might want to test them, but if you walk in on your own, you're singing and dancing, I don't have to worry about that too much. They have a little AAA battery pen light, they look in your eyes and down your throat with, and that was given to them by some salesman for a pharmaceutical company. You can jerk it out of their pocket and look at it, and you'll say, oh, look at that, Pfizer. Okay? So they have less than $100 worth of stuff. You can go to a pharmacy or a grocery store and buy all that stuff yourself without a prescription. With the exception of ultrasound and radiation and CAT scans and MRIs, you can get just about any test that a doctor would send you to a lab or a hospital for. For instance, you can go and you can buy a little bottle of test strips to find out what your blood sugar and blood cholesterol is. You can get little test strips to find out if you have blood or sugar in your urine. You can get test strips to find out if you have blood in your bowel movement to do a screen for colon cancer and ulcerative colitis, maybe gastric ulcers. You can find out if you're pregnant or not. For $19.95, you can get a little test strip, you pee on it, and you find out if you're pregnant or not. 30 seconds, honey, I'm pregnant, kind of thing, right? 30 seconds, $19.95. You don't have to go get a physical exam, get a blood test, they charge you $150, and then you got to come back in 3 days for another $150 visit, so it winds up being like $500 to find out if you're pregnant or not. You can do it for $19.95. the one that I really find disgusting are the fertility clinics. You have to pay $25,000 up front before they even talk to you, because they might slip and give you a little information. So before the doctor will see you, you got to pay your $25,000, and then they'll start talking to you about what they can do to help you in a situation of infertility. Well, they want you to believe that they are the holders of all knowledge in this. Well, back when I was a kid, my dad only, 60 years ago, my dad only had a 4th grade education, and he knew how to artificially inseminate cattle back then. It was not a new thing. We've been doing it livestock for 75 years. Maybe longer than that in research, but out in the field practicing, any farmer could do AI or artificial insemination themselves. And, with a $2.95 basting syringe and a condom to collect semen, you can do it yourself for less than $5. So when a doctor starts telling you how technical this stuff is, you can just sort of smile at him and say, okay, doc, let's move forward here. Now, how many ever heard of cholesterol? Raise your hand. If you didn't raise your hand, I think you're asleep. Okay. Each year in America, we spend over $100 billion for cholesterol testing. Not treatment. Just cholesterol testing, we spend over $100 billion a year. It's a huge industry just for cholesterol testing. That's why, doctors made everybody in America paranoid. How many of you had anybody in your family live in their 80s or 90s? Raise your hand. Sure, I think most people in America have had somebody in their family live to be 80, 90. I guarantee you they ate eggs, they cooked in butter, they didn't have margarine back then. They salted their food. These people smoked. They, they ate red meat instead of tofu. They ate eggs instead of egg beaters. They didn't exercise, and yet they lived to be 80, 90. Many of them went on to live to be 100. And following their advice, we're going backwards. Spending $100 billion a year for cholesterol levels and eating the way doctors have told us. Most people revere their doctors. We've gone from 17th in the world in longevity to 24th. So it doesn't seem like all that's doing much good. Well, if any of you can find me a disease, if anybody in this room can find me any disease that is caused by elevated blood cholesterol and triglycerides, they'll give you $1 million, small bills, and any offshore account you want tax-free. There's not a single disease caused by elevated blood cholesterol and triglycerides. When you have elevated blood cholesterol and triglycerides, I kind of look for other things. You might have a deficiency of niacin, vitamin B3. You could have deficiencies of chromium and vanadium, 2 trace minerals. You might have deficiencies of the essential fatty acids, or a ratio problem between omega-3 and omega-6s. You could have early goiter, or hypothyroidism will cause an elevation in your blood triglycerides and blood cholesterol. You could have early diabetes. You can have early diabetes. Even before your blood sugar goes up, your blood cholesterol and triglycerides go up when you have diabetes. Don't take my word for it. Go to the library and look in a medical book on diagnoses. What's the first blood changes that occur when you have diabetes? Elevated blood cholesterol and triglycerides. What's the first blood changes when you have low thyroid? Elevated blood cholesterol and triglycerides. Do the elevated blood cholesterol and triglycerides cause any disease? No. They're just signals. They're just signals to look somewhere. Do they cause cardiovascular disease? No. Have nothing to do with cardiovascular disease. Nothing. Well, why do doctors get so excited about lowering your cholesterol and lowering your blood triglycerides? Because they get a kickback every time they write a prescription for statin drugs. Lipitor, Loped, and Lipitor. Why would you take a drug that doesn't really do anything, doesn't prevent diseases, lowers your cholesterol, that's what they do, but it causes liver cirrhosis and blindness. That's why you got to go in every couple of months to get your blood taken to see how your liver's doing. They got to look in your eye to make sure you're not going blind yet. Why would you take a drug that gives you liver cirrhosis and makes you go blind when it doesn't do anything?